welcome to All Things Engineering by EIT. This is a podcast where we cover industry insights, emerging trends, and practical knowledge across engineering disciplines.
So I'm the Dean and very keen to talk about these topics.
And I'm Edwina, and I'm the Public Affairs Manager. Is that right? Our topic today is disruption, and we're going to be looking at three aspects of disruption. One that's been around for some time, technology, fairly new AI, and
the good old president, Mr. Trump, who's been hugely disruptive. So we want to have a chat about that. So let's dissect the good old stuff about AI. Now, I know, Edwina, you've got quite a few comments to make about AI, as you're quite involved with the repercussions of AI in the college. What's your take on it?
Well, I think we've discussed AI before, but it is an interesting area, and I think it's one that is saving people an awful lot of time because it helps with preparation and provides ideas. But because I do a lot of the writing and editing, I do find there are some issues. And interestingly, I was chatting to my colleague in Human Resources yesterday, and she reckons that a lot of the cover letters, she knows immediately when they've been written by AI because they default to the US English rather than what she would expect in Australia, which is British English. So that was one thing she pointed out.
And they're probably a little bit vanilla-like as well, but boring, predictable prose.
I think what I've found, Steve, is that they tend to be, it tends to be repetitive. It likes to bulk out its ideas. So there's a great deal of repetition.
The way I look at AI now, when I see these letters, is basically it's a sophisticated form of searching online. It gathers all the stuff together for you and then sort of cobbles it together into a bit of text. And if you want some magic to your prose, to your communication, you've really got to work on the AI. I mean, it's a good start, but you need to really put some vuma, if I can use that word, into your prose to try and zap it a bit and give it some distinctive quality.
I think that was a Zulu word, Steve.
Yeah, it is, absolutely.
It's interesting. It's a good onomatopoeic word. I like it.
And I think that's what you've got to do with the stuff you've got. But I've been rather disappointed with AI at the moment, and I think it's got huge benefits. But when you ask it to do something for you as a little assistant, it tends to go off on tangents and make a lot of errors. So you've got to be really vigilant about it at the moment. I'm hopeful that it'll improve, but I've got a feeling that you're still going to need the human element there to put a lot of effort into get it to the next level, which is acceptable.
I think
that's life.
You mentioned the word vanilla before. I think it does produce content that is a little bit soulless because you lose your voice in when you use it. It comes up with a very anybody asking for the same thing would get the same thing. So you're extracting your voice and your personality from that communication.
That's exactly what's happening. I think it's an average over all the search items in that particular context of that letter that you're writing. It goes and averages out and gives you the average response, which is fine. That's how it does it. Unfortunately, there's also a huge amount of rubbish on the internet, which it's also got on its database. And of course, you've got to then use all that as well. So you've really got to be vigilant about it. But look, it's definitely worth using. And I'm hopeful that that it will be an incredible opportunity going forward. I mean, we're starting to use it in our courses as an assistant, and it's as long as it's trained on our text, our books, our instructors, lecturers, it adds huge value to your learning experience, but you still need the human playing a key role there.
As Steve has spoken a great deal about AI, and I know he refers to the fact that you still need to be the expert. No matter what your expertise in it, you have to bring it to what, the ideas that AI generates.
So I think if you harness it, you're away. If you can use it as a human running it, you're away. And that's what we've got to keep doing. Be critical all the time. Never trust. And as you say, Edwina, your arts degree, you said, it doesn't really have much employment prospects, but in fact it does. It teaches you critical thinking. And that's what's so good. I mean, from Jane Austen to, Shakespeare, Hemingway. Anyway, let's move on to the next topic, which is, of course...
Technology has been, changing and disrupting for some time, Steve. You would be a guru in that area, I suppose. AI is part of it.
Yeah,
but...
I must say, with technology, I'm constantly bewildered by the changes happening, and I'm always realizing that you've got this big, gigantic dog chasing you, wanting to bite you with the technology dog. So you've got to be constantly vigilant. But above all, there's a lot of dead ends with technology and things we go down. And I think it's a little bit disappointing sometimes when you try and use a particular form of technology and it's not very human friendly. And that is quite irritating for people using a new program or something. And I can't say enough about making it idiot proof. I mean, Steve Jobs from Apple had a few things to say about simplicity. And I always tell my students in the class, probably one of the most important engineering principles is the KISS principle. And you know what the KISS principle is?
I've heard that before. Keep it simple, stupid.
Yeah, that's right. And I think a lot of these programmers designing stuff make it too complex. It's got to be designed for simplicity, and that's often difficult. And especially someone like myself, stumbling around a program, trying to understand what's going on. If it's not simple, intuitive, you give up.
But in terms of technology disrupting industry, Steve, how does somebody working in the industry deal with this constant underpinning and disruption by technology?
I think you've just got to obviously look at it from an economic point of view, and I think that's often forgotten. You can come with an expensive high-tech solution to a simple low-tech problem. So at the end of the day, dollars and cents have got to matter. And often engineering types ignore that, but the technology has to make financial sense. But certainly in my area, industrial automation, I think there's still ongoing opportunities to apply technology. And then we're doing it here in the college as well at EIT. Again, you've got to make sure that your application of technology is simple, idiot-proof, and works. And I think often that's forgotten. But, in your area with technology, what's your take on it?
No, none at all. I'm still having to rely on my brain, thank goodness. I'm not very clever with technology. But I think it can be daunting because I think all engineers and environment technologists, technicians in an environment that is being disrupted, and it can be daunting and can be intimidating. But I think you need to have more faith in yourself, and that where necessary, then upskill if you can. Use a mentor to teach you on something that he or she has knowledge in. Find a course if you can, if you feel it's necessary, but believe in yourself. You're probably learning while you are working anyway in the changing environment.
Absolutely. I think technology you can pick up quite quickly as an engineer or a technologist or technician. And training and learning is a critical part, but you don't need to go on formal courses. Most learning is done with your chum or your buddy or your compadre who's communicating to you on the internet. Why don't you try this? Why don't you try that? That's where the real learning occurs. And I think that's always a great part of learning new ways of doing things. And I think that's a critical part of what we do.
I think one thing I would add though, Steve, is that people need to be open to change. I think if you feel that the way to do it is to be obstinate and to say, this is the old way, this has always worked for me, I'm not going to change, I think that might be difficult in the long run.
No, that's true. I think you do need to be open to change all the time. And the other thing I think is really important, and I think is often neglected, is that with AI tends to focus on the knowledge part of learning, A plus B equals C. But I think one of the biggest opportunities for us in engineering and education is skills, learning real skills. In other words, how to use a hammer properly. I mean, as simple as that. But actually learning skills, that is something which is really hard for AI to take away from you as a worker or person in the engineering technology business. So skills are something which we've got to constantly look to acquire. It's all good and well having knowledge, but the skills are the sucker punch. That's where you really add value to your career.
And we know that employers want that experience in industry. Even though things are changing, they rely on people with experience. So that counts for a great deal, because you have the context in which that work is taking place, and lots of new graduates don't necessarily have that. So to try and get your foot in that industry door as early as you can is a great thing.
Yeah, and building up skills is absolutely critical with experience. Yeah. And obviously the third item we were going to chat about is the good old Trump fellow who's kicking things around a bit. I suppose I'd prefer to look at it from an objective point of view rather than getting too emotional about him. I think there's lots of people getting rather agitated about Trump. I always say these things pass. So if you're president for 5 years, well, after that, who knows what happens. He's certainly making a huge impact, and we've got to be aware of it, because I think it will filter through to what we do as engineers, technologists. I think one of these biggest impacts in America anyway, and it's sort of impacting here in Australia, is obviously universities. He's restricting funding and trying to shut down education departments. And I think, at the end of the day, we've got to really take our learning, our education ourselves. We've got to take ownership of that ourselves. And I suspect that university isn't the panacea for learning that everyone thinks it is. It's really a mixture of vocational colleges, learning experience, on-the-job experiences, as well as university. So no university is sort of independent, setting forth their views. Every university should be considered as part of the overall mix. And I think that's probably something which Trump is attacking, and I suspect he'll have some resonance there. What's your take on Trump?
I think people need to take the emotion out of it. I think because he is a disruptor, and because uncertainty has resulted, and a lot of people find that terribly worrying and concerning, I think the emotion must come out of it. I think we need to learn to have faith in systems. They've been set up over many years, and sometimes a shake-up is not necessarily a bad thing. And as Steve says, it does pass, but it also makes us think. I think when there is disruption and uncertainty, we think more about something, but we cannot do that if it's burdened by emotion. So we need to be impartial, stand back and listen, look, and see how you can fit into this new world where there is uncertainty, and what the opportunities are for you.
Absolutely, I agree with you 100%. One has to be as rational as possible about these sort of things, and objective, and that obviously will make a huge difference to how one approaches your career and your life. And I think also, and it's a bit difficult saying this in today's world, but don't be a victim. You've got to be Trump may impact on you or someone else may impact on you, but don't be a victim and say, oh, mate, it's all your fault. You've actually got to take ownership of the situation yourself. And also, I think, support your chums, your colleagues. There's so many bad things that happen will be on Trump. And I think you've got, health issues and stuff like that. So you've got to really see that from a point of view. And some terrible things happen to people, but you just got to try and do what you can with your resources. But above all, I don't think being a victim is very helpful. You've got to be proactive, take the right approach, and try and drive yourself forward. And as I said, some people have terrible disadvantages. Try and use technology to alleviate things and try and be positive and supportive of your colleagues, friends in there when they need you. And I think that's really important.
So disruption keeps us on our toes, Steve.
Absolutely. Disruption keeps us on our toes. And I actually think it does create a lot of opportunity as well. And I mean, I look at some very large company that's sort of sprung up over the last 10 years, helping, flood disasters and stuff like that, which must be highly stressful. So if you have a flood or you have some medical emergency, which obviously we all know about from 2020, this company actually supports people in those situations. So again, huge company now. And whenever there's disruption, change, if you can hold your nerve, jump in, I think there's always opportunities for engineering types to provide solutions. But try and do it in a rational, considered fashion. Don't get emotional about it, even though we're obviously all emotional beings, as we know. But
It'd be interesting to hear from our listeners how they are coping with disruption as well.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to get some feedback, about what you think about Trump. I mean, obviously there's a huge amount of discussion now about people burning Tesla cars and stuff like that. I mean, a very emotional response. I think at the end of the day, how you're handling the changes and how do you have a considered approach to solving these problems. It's always good to get feedback on, and which we can then pass on to others to listen to.
I love the word dispassionate when it comes to this. I love passion, but I think there are some circumstances that require one to be dispassionate.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thanks very much.
Thanks,
Edwina,
everybody.
for that.
Thank you, Steve.
Thank you, Edwina.
Thank you.
Hope you have a magnificent day, everyone out there. And thanks for listening this far. Cheers.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to follow and subscribe, and so that you don't miss future conversations. We've got some exciting guests lined up and a lot more to share. So do connect with us on social media and share your thoughts, questions, or experiences. So until next time, stay curious and keep pushing boundaries. Thanks, everyone.